What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So I just wanted to shoot a quick video about antenna testing, but I'm not going to be talking about HF antennas. I'm going to be talking about HT antennas. But in order to talk about HT antennas, I'm actually going to talk about HF antennas. I know, convoluted, but bear with me, you'll see where I'm going with this. So in front of me on the ground, I have out here in the distance here, we have a Wolf River Coils 213-inch whip on the tripod. Okay, so that guy fully extended should be resonant at the very bottom of the 20 meter band, so around roughly 14 megahertz. So you're probably not going to be able to see this on screen because it's bright out here, but I've got a Nano VNA hooked up to this. And if I look at 14 megahertz, I'll bring this in front of the camera, but you probably won't be able to see it. All right, up here in the corner, sure you can't see that, it says we are at 3.4 SWR. Okay, that's really, really high for 20 meters. All right, our little plot is actually off the screen here. So what's going on here? That should be resonant on 20 meters and it isn't. Well, if you think back, I'm going to flip this screen over so I can see what I'm doing here. I got to unplug my power to do that though. In order to, I got to flip that screen around so I can make sure I'm actually in the shot. So to talk about what's going on here, in my hand I have a 20-30-40 link dipole. And in the center of that dipole we have a BNC binding post. So if you remember my video where I built that 20 meter monoband dipole here in the yard, we had a binding post and then we had roughly 16 and change feet coming off each side of that binding post. So remember, that antenna has to have both sides. If I took one of those legs off that binding post, we would only have half of the antenna. Well, that's what's going on out here. I've got a 17-foot whip, which is a quarter wave on 2 meters. I'm missing the other half of that antenna to make it resonant, okay? So that vertical out there is kind of like this dipole missing one of the two legs, okay? So let me flip my screen back around here and plug you guys back in. This is going to get a little bit disjointed, but I want to make sure this camera doesn't die. This particular camera that I'm on a Sony ZV-E10 and it is power hungry. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to change anything else. I'm not going to tune this antenna at all. I'm not going to do anything. I'm literally just going to walk over and you'll see on the ground next to the antenna, I have a couple sheets of Faraday cloth. No ground radials, no nothing. I don't have any wires on this. I'm just going to pick it up and I'm literally just going to set this down on top of the Faraday cloth. I'm not going to change the length of the antenna. I'm not attaching any ground radials to it, nothing. It's just set the antenna on top of the Faraday cloth. Now let's take a look at our Nano VNA and see what our SWR looks like. So now, recall 14 megahertz. And now, when we look at this, again, you're probably not gonna be able to see this on the screen, but I am at 1.10, 1.0, 1.09, 1.1. So we're at like a 1.1 to 1 SWR. You can see here's my SWR line here on the bottom of this screen, that blue line, and it plots, we're at 14.025. Let me get my hand off the coax so that's going to affect it. We're at 14.025, we're at 1.1, and if I come up the band, we're still at 1.1. Oh, there's 1.2 at about 14.2. Okay, so up in the phone portion of the band. So you can see now we're resonant all the way across the 20 meter portion of the band. And again, if you can't see that on a screen, I apologize. It is very bright out here and these Nano VNA screens aren't super bright. So if you think about what's going on here, it's pretty straightforward, right? I have this vertical that needs the other half of the antenna to function properly, right? If I don't have that other half of the antenna, it doesn't work the way it's intended to work. The same thing happens with an HT, and this is where people run into problems, okay? I've had a lot of people watch my videos on HT antennas, and they're like, oh man, I tested these HT antennas. Sorry, the gnats are crazy. I've tested HT antennas, and these things are garbage. They've got horrible SWR. You can't test an HT antenna the way you test this antenna, there's an exception to that. But what I've got here in front of me, I have, it's just a Baofeng UV5R. and I have a Surecom SW33 Plus power meter and SWR meter attached to this, okay? Now, if I take an antenna like, let's say, a signal stick is a quarter wave on 2 meters. This antenna is the vertical portion of that antenna. And if you remember, I need the other half of the antenna for this thing to work properly. So what happens is people will plug this thing into a nano VNA and they'll test it and it's got horrendous SWR. Or there are some that are even worse, I'll show you in a second. But if I plug this into a nano VNA, and I'm not gonna do it right now, but if I plug this into a nano VNA and punched in the 2 meter band, the SWR would be off the charts. If I do this on this HT here, now remember, this antenna is designed to be attached directly to the radio. When this is attached to the radio, not to this power meter, I am the ground plane. I am the other half of the antenna system. I'm the other half of that antenna network. So when I key this up, I'm on 146.52, K2 EJT testing. I'm at about 1.5 to 1 SWR. Again, you're probably not gonna be able to see that on the screen. Maybe you will. We're about 1.5 to 1 SWR. Remember, this is a quarter wave antenna, and I am a good ground plane on this right now. Now, if I go to 446, now I'm on 70 centimeters. This is a 3/4 wave on 70 centimeters. Now when I key this thing up, K2 EJT testing. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it is a 4.99 to 1 SWR. This antenna is resonant on 70 centimeters with me in the system. But because this isn't attached directly to the HT up next to my face using my entire body as the other half of the antenna, the SWR is abysmal, okay? I've got a Smiley 2 meter rubber duck down here, stubby duck. I put that guy on here. This should be pretty good attached to the radio. Now, if I put this on the nano VNA, I've done it, it's like a 5 to 1. So let me switch back to K2 EJT testing. 1.05 to 1, okay? Now, if I do this on that nano VNA, it's like a 4 or 5 to 1. The only time you can ever use an HT antenna on a meter like this or a nano VNA and know you're gonna get the correct results is if it is something like this MFJ 2 meter. Okay, this is a full half wave on 2 meters. In other words, it does not need a ground plane, okay? This antenna is a full half wave. Now remember, we're feeding it from the end, like an end-fed half wave HF antenna. So we've got to have a way to match the impedance, right? Because our impedance is going to be super high here at the end of the antenna. Our impedance is going to be the lowest in the middle, right? That's why a dipole's fed from the center. So I've got to have a way to match that, which this does down here in the base of the antenna. But if I key this guy up, K2 EJT testing, 1.01 to 1, okay? In this instance, this is a valid test because this is resonant. This is a full half wave antenna. That's a valid test. None of the rest of the tests I ran with this HT are worth anything, all right? Because I'm missing the other half of that antenna system. Now this is better than hooking the antenna directly to a nano VNA and testing it because then you really don't have the other half of the antenna. But even this, right, I've got this power meter and everything in between here. So I just wanted to shoot this video real quickly to caution people when you look at HT antennas, remember that it's a system, right? It's not, that antenna is not standalone in a vacuum. That you've got an antenna that's attached to a radio. The chassis of that radio is metal. That radio is then in your hand, which is using your body as the other half of that antenna system, just like that Faraday cloth is the other half of the antenna system for this 17-foot vertical out here in the yard. So folks, I know, you know, HT testing for antennas is complicated. The companies that do it have the right stuff to test these. I don't, all right? Can I use that little meter that I have attached to the radio to compare two antennas and see which one might be better? Yeah, I can. You know, it may not be accurate, but if one says it's a 3 to 1 SWR and the other one says 4 to 1, maybe the one with the 3 to 1's better, but I don't know because I don't know what it's like when it's hooked to the radio in my hand, you know, using my body as the rest of the antenna system. So I just want to caution people, when you look at HTs and you look at HT antennas, don't immediately stick it on an antenna analyzer and think you're going to get valid data because you aren't, okay? It's different when we're talking about an antenna like this because this is both halves of the equation, right? I do have my whip, and in this case, I have my ground plane, which is my Faraday cloth. On a dipole, I have both legs coming off of that big dipole. An end-fed half wave, by definition, is a half wavelength, okay? So remember, you know, take all the testing you see with a grain of salt. When you see people talking about testing HT antennas and SWR, unless they have the equipment to do it correctly, it's not really that valid. My advice to you would be, the best way to test an HT antenna is use it and see how it performs. You know, can you work simplex further with that antenna than you could with the other one? Are you getting into that far away repeater better? You know, are you full quieting on a repeater that you're not full quieting on with a different antenna? Those things are kind of how I would measure HT antenna performance, not raw numbers on an SWR meter, a Nano VNA, or an antenna analyzer or something like that, because it's just not a valid test unless you have all the equipment to do that. So folks, I hope that was at least a little bit informative. I'm not an antenna expert. There are people that know way more about this stuff than I do. I just wanted to get that out there because I've had a lot of people over the past year or so comment in some of my videos about, you know, oh, I bought this antenna and it tested garbage, or I bought this antenna and it tested garbage, or this one tested great. Take it with a grain of salt. Like I said, if we're talking about an HT antenna, at the end of the day, how does it perform? Does it perform better than the other one? Yeah, then use it. If it doesn't, use something else. So hopefully that was helpful. If you got any questions, go ahead and feel free to leave it below in the comments. As always, like I said, please try to keep the comments civil. I try to answer every single question that someone asks. And the more civil you are with me, the more civil I'm gonna be with you. If you leave garbage in the comments, I'm just gonna make it go away, all right? I don't delete negative comments if they're constructive. If you're just an idiot in the comments, yes, I'm just gonna make it go away because that's not constructive. Constructive criticism is good. Criticism for criticism's sake, just to be a troll, isn't. Okay, so if you've got constructive criticism about anything I talked about here, if I'm wrong about something, because again, I'm not an expert. There are people that are going to be experts on this stuff that may come in and say, nope, this is wrong, this was right, so on and so forth. Feel free to leave that in the comments. But back it up with actual data. Like I said, this is just my experience. You know, the HF stuff is easy. The HT antennas are a little bit different ball game. So thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, as always, 73.